Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around it's going to be a bit of Lizard on Dwarf gameplay on the map, the Sea of Chaos Isle. And for this build we are going to be going with the old classic of too much HP to burn through, which is really one of my favorite strats against the Dwarves as Lizardmen. It just brings so much infantry so that you have too much HP for the dwarves to kill. They can't stop you. They're not fast enough to block all the units swarming all over them. And as a result, you get into their back lines and you scrunch their missiles while their infantry is still tied down on your more elite troops. Lizardmen are really a good faction. They're probably the best faction for this. And that's really because all of their mid-tier troops have decent combat stats, an incredibly high HP pool, and shields. So units like Saurus Warriors, units like Temple Guard, who are a bit more elite, just have so much HP that they are just very, very difficult to shut down for the dwarves, especially with more conventional missiles. So that is really what we're going to be focusing on here. For my lord, I'm going to be rocking 10-1. He is a oddball of a choice. I know he's not very popular, not really a meta pick, but I really do like him against the Dawi, because as long as you can prevent gyrocopters, and this is a lesson that I learned at some cost to myself, is that you need to counter gyrocopters or 10-1 is dying horribly. You can get a lot of value out of him. He's a decent combatant. He can really disrupt backlines himself. He does bring the transformation of Kadon, which is very, very nice. Lets you disrupt backlines with that Manticore summon. He himself does get Amber Spear. You can snipe out Iron Breakers, units like that. And of course, Wizen's Wild Form is nice just to buff up your Saurus, keep them in the fight a little bit better, and make them a little beefier. Besides that, of course, Arcane Conduit, Stand Your Ground, and the Wild Heart gets me a little more Winds of Magic and a little bit more beefiness if the need arises. And really, 10-1, very solid combatant. If I need to snipe out a Lord, especially with Cycle Charging in late game, 10-1 can pull it off. Now, backing him up, as I mentioned, Gyrocopter's massive threat, so we've kind of got the Anti-Air Goon Squad here. And that is composed of 2 Skink Chiefs. These guys are dirt cheap, and they also double up as both backline harass as well as Slayer counter. These guys can actually kill an entire unit of Slayers when they use up their ammo pool, which actually doesn't take as much time as one would think. And they can also poison and debuff enemy troops, which is very, very useful overall. And they only cost 350 a pop. And they are backed by the Amixon Barbs, the Razor Dawn Regiment of Renown. So these guys might seem like an oddball pick, but they do have a little bit of missile resist, which makes them beefier than one would expect. And they actually do a lot of AP damage, plus they apply poison. So in a range exchange, they're not bad. They're actually recommended to be my Yumeis as a counter against gyrocopters, and I've kind of been messing around with them and found them to be pretty useful. And at the same time, they're not terrible against foot troops. Besides that, we do have a front line composed entirely of Temple Guard as well as Saurus Warriors, mix and match 3 of each. And on the flanks there, we do have some red-crested skinks, including the Regiment of Renown, cohort of Sotek. Finally, 3 units of skinks providing a bit of a pseudo-cav contingent here, which is going to be looking to sneak around the back flank here. When I realized that my opponent hadn't brought any gyrocopters and didn't really have anything to zone me out. Now, I will say I absolutely hate some of these sort of Sea of Chaos style maps because they are so very compact and there's not really any room to maneuver. In my opinion, it really stifles creativity and stifles strategic plays, but regardless, we are going to be trying to march down the pipe here. Definitely a bit difficult with such a wide army, but if you're not going for Monster Mash, you kind of got to go wide against the Dawi. For my opponent's build, it's a bit unconventional. We are going to see Belgar Ironhammer, Mr. Revenge Incarnate here, marching alongside his troops, and this bad boy does have the Mighty Oathstone, of course, for that melee defense buff and that charge defense. He does also have the Revenge Incarnate, doing boatloads of damage every 2 minutes, and then Hammer of Angerund, which does grant him some pretty insane base stats. Like, look at that, 60 on melee attack, 60 defense, 530 weapon strength, just an absolute beefcake. Really quite dangerous. And obviously, while 10-1 is pretty beefy, he can pose a threat. There are 2 Thanes, which is definitely the meme pick of the year here, and these guys are coming in with some interesting rune choices. You've got Rune of Slowness for the snare, not something you see every day, and Ironbeard's Ring. Now, the flame weakness is something you normally don't see, but in fact, we're going to see it synergized here with Iron Drakes, and we'll see just how well they do. If my opponent is able to interdict me with the Thanes and then roast me with the Iron Drakes, could be an ugly time. Saurus don't have that much armor, so Iron Drakes could do quite a bit of work there. Front line composed of some miners with blasting charges. These guys will do a lot of hurt to especially skinks, but they'll even do some damage to Saurus. They are backed by a bunch of Longbeards here on the peripheries. Longbeards pretty nasty. They trade fairly well with Saurus. They're not as well as they used to ever since they got more expensive. And Saurus will still win that fight. It just takes forever. It is a grind. It is the definition of grind. Some Dwarf Warriors weapons out on the periphery, providing some AP support, a few Thunderers for that anti-large work, and then some Dwarf Warriors in the back, as well as 2 units of Slayers, one of which is the Dragonbacks. And Dragonbacks, of course, also do imbue fire weakness, though I believe it is also, actually, I think it's separate weakness from the Thane, so you can actually stack those on top of each other, get that extra 44% fire weakness, I believe. But regardless, we are going to start using our Amazon Barbs here, looking to chip down those Miners blasting charges. My opponent here pushing forward with the Thunders, looking to take some pot shots back at me, but too late for these guys. They have taken their casualties, they're licking, and they are kind of beat up there. In the meantime, the Skink Chiefs are popping shots on their flank. We're going to see a few blasting charges flung in on the Saurus, dropping a few to the ground, but the Saurus don't really care, and they are going to plow forward, though not before some disgusting flame burns through them, though mostly burns through the Miners, so ugly sight for the poor Dawi. Definitely not where they want to be in life, as our first Manticore summon is going down. And you can see my opponent here pushing with the Thunderers. Big misplay. Big misplay there from him. But the cleansing flame of the Saurus Warrior against the Saurus Warriors, you're just doing insane work with the help from that Thane's debuffing ring. And yeah, Saurus Warriors already down about half HP there. Elsewhere, the Manticore does dive in, going after the Thunderers, looking to get that meaty engagement. And I probably got a little overzealous here. I probably could have played a little more cautiously because my Skinks are still not in position. And that is definitely hurting me, that I'm not actually hitting my opponent all at once. So he's actually able to break these Saurus before I'm able to do much else. These Skinks are still trying to flank around. Of course, this very narrow map is just not conducive at all. But Temple Guard here taking these peripheral fights against the Dwarf Warriors, they will win that pretty handily. And in the meantime, 10-1 diving in on the Iron Drakes here. And he is going to tear these guys to shreds. Toss one of those dwarves aside. And although they are trying to burn him at close range, they do not have very good combat stats. So 10-1 is going to chunk him pretty quick. He does a lot of damage. He's got good combat stats and AP damage. And so these guys are not lasting too long. And with only a little over 2k HP, 2700 there, he can chunk him very, very quickly. In the meantime, we do see the red-crested Skinks swarming into the Miners with blasting charges, and the Thunderers just looking to compromise his backline as quick as possible. But over here, unfortunately, Skinks are getting roasted, and my opponent is able to zone me out with the Dwarf Warriors. And unfortunately, I just can't really shut down these Dwarf Warriors. Skinks aren't doing that. Manticore over here does rout, unfortunately, and the Thunders continue their murderous hail of fire. Saurus Warriors rallying in the distance as the Amazon Barbs do try to disengage for some pot shots. We do get another Manticore here. My opponent trying to pull his troops away and pursuing with Slayers, which is very annoying. Slayer's a huge threat to Teeny Weeny there. And so he is forced to flee, trying to escape through the Longbeards. Unfortunately, that does mean the Dragonbacks now are going to get tied down. You can see the Skink Chiefs, as well as the Amazon Barbs, had been unloading some pot shots in these guys, whittling them down quite heavily. Thunderers, though, now pivoting and firing against me. Definitely not cool. Amazon Barbs do melt these Iron Drakes. They're going to rout. Iron Drakes do not, in fact, have immune to psychology, so they can be routed, as can these Thunderers, and the red-crested Skinks dragging them into the muck. Over here on the periphery, the Cohort of Sotek and the Skink Cohort overwhelming Dwarf Warriors. My opponent there popping some fiery breaths from the Iron Drakes and really roasting the poor Skinks, who just do not have the armor, but also harming his Dwarfs pretty heavily too. And so we are doing rather well. We are slowly but surely grounding on this flank. Over here on the periphery, we are able to rout off most of my opponent's key troops, even though these Thunderers and Iron Drakes continue to be a major nuisance, routing off my poor Skink Cohorts with those massive bursts of flame. But a Skink Chief here is going to sneak into the Iron Drakes. Not going to do a lot of damage. So if we look at the Skink Chief's stats here, this guy is not a melee fighter. He has only 80 damage and 230 non-AP. Iron Drakes have 125 armor. They're basically Iron Breakers armor-wise. They're actually just Iron Breakers, but with fancy weapons. So this guy's doing basically nothing to him. But at least he's tying them down. He's preventing them from firing. That's really what matters. I'm actually not even sure if he could beat them. Skink Chiefs are really not the pride of the melee combat core, but we are distracting them. We are disrupting them. Well, over here, the red-crested Skinks are swarming into the backline and compromising these Thunderers. Over here on the flank, the Dragonback Slayers are able to break through the Saurus Warriors, so a little bit of a win there for my opponent. But Temple Guard continues wailing on the Slayers and slowly but surely chewing its way through. And Temple Guard, very potent, still on 4. You look at this HP and you think, wow, these guys are really weak. They're on 4,200 HP. They are still beefcakes. And they have a lot of leadership. And of course, Dwarfs do not have fear and terror, so they're not going to tear out these guys. There's still a unit over here on 3,000 HP. These guys almost 6k. And these Longbeards are almost goners. My opponent is running out of troops. As I mentioned before, we just have so much HP for my opponent to try to burn through. And my opponent can't burn through it. We are able to get in on these Dwarf Warriors, the red-crested skinks swarming all over the Thunderers and removing them from play, moving on to the Iron Drakes. Over here, unfortunately, the Cobra Sotek's still taking a little bit of time, and I don't have these guys moving back in, which is a big misplay. But we are able to swarm all over these Iron Drakes. And unlike the loser of a Skink Chief, if the red-crested skinks are able to stick around here, they will drag Iron Drakes down pretty quick. The melee defense is very poor. These guys do not have the best melee attack, but there's a lot of them. As you can see, the Gouts of Flame. One of the very annoying things is that, of course, on guard mode, infantry can keep firing as long as they're not engaged directly in melee. So they are actually able to get a Gout of Flame there. Dwarf Warriors get the rear charge, and the Red Crests flee. Simultaneously, fire going down on the Skink Chief over here as he pursues the Thunderers. And some of the Thunderers get roasted by their friendly Dowie. I do counteract with Cold-Blooded, popping that to keep my leadership in check. And swarming forward. Over here, the Barbs are being pursued by the very angry Slayers. Massive misplay here on my part, just not kiting away faster. These guys should not have lost any models to these Slayers. Instead, the Slayers are actually racking up the kills, which is just nuts. But the Skink Chief there, whittling them down. As I mentioned, he can pop a shot, kills a model a shot, which adds up. There's only 60 models on the Slayers. This guy has 82 ammo, so he will kill them in their entirety and still have ammo to spare. And he only costs 350. He costs nothing. He costs peanuts. Over here, 10-1 does actually get interdicted by the Thane. Not entirely sure how that works out, but he does, and he does get roasted there by the Iron Drakes. So, honestly, a bit of stupid pathing, because the Thane wasn't even in his way, but it does cost me teeny weenie's HP here, and costs about, I don't know, 700 or so HP. Just absolutely nuts. I was actually a little ticked off by this, because really, teeny weenie should have been able to just pile into the Iron Drakes. But fortunately, the Amazon Barbs, they're able to get some pot shots on the Iron Drakes. 10-1 does stand your ground in Wiston's wild form, so he's able to keep his armor up and flee the Iron Drakes before they do too much damage. And now the Core of Sotek does swarm all over the Iron Drakes, and they will drag them into the muck. Core of Sotek, of course, does get rank 9 stats plus the Frenzy, so that's permanent because they're unbreakable. So they really do the damage there. While over here, we are able to muck up the Slayers with the Razor Dawn Hunting Pack. At this point, they just have, well, they only have one model, so it doesn't matter. It's clean up and online. Over here, Skink Chief cleaning up the Thane. My opponent is definitely on his last legs. I do try to get in with 10-1, not succeeding. I was trying to get a Amber Spear off on these guys, but it just doesn't work out. Temple Guard are going to finish the job there. The Code of Sotek, of course, is not going to break. They're not going to lose models. They overwhelmed the Iron Drakes. A little bit of a last stand here for the Dowie as they're getting clubbed down by those very angry Skinks. Those scrawny lads doing quite a bit of work. Dwarf Warriors getting dragged down by the Temple Guard. Temple Guard is such an awesome unit. I love all the flourishes they do and all those tail whips and spinning around. Definitely showing these dwarves who's boss. Over here in the meantime, we are seeing the Saurus and Temple Guard kind of mingled in on top of one another, beating down Belagar, actually sending him flying forward there because they're just so tough and so beefy. And it's really just clean up at this stage. Temple Guard, you can see 11 models left and they're still fighting. This really highlights how dwarves can't really break Lizard heavy infantry very well at all. There's just so much leadership. They're very difficult to break unless you completely cripple them and recharge them and all that. And it's very unlikely. So now Belagar in on his last legs. It's going to be a while, but I still have some ammo on my Skink Chiefs. So if I really wanted to, I could actually just kite Belagar to death. The Thanes are going to get dragged into the muck. Core Sotek here doing a number on the Thane. The Razor Dawns will actually dive into the Dwarf Warriors. And at this point, it's going to be GG for the forces of the Lizards. So, a Pyrrhic victory for the Lizard people. Now, certainly we took some bloody casualties there, and to be quite honest, I think one of the biggest problems there was actually the map. It was very difficult for me to get a proper surround on a map that's quite so narrow and condensed as the Sea of Chaos Isles. It's just a very annoying map design, and quite frankly, it's a map design I'm not a fan of, but it did make it very difficult to get a good envelopment. However, I also was very impatient, and that cost me a lot of damage. An entire unit of Saurus was routed without ever engaging, or with barely engaging, because I was impatient, and I didn't wait for the Skinks to be in position to get that flank. And that was a massive misplay there. Also slipped up on my micro with the Amazon Barb, slipping up on micro with 10-1 a few times, getting whittled down a massive amount, especially by Slayers and later by Iron Drakes. Just not great. That said, ultimately, HP prevails. That is a lesson to be had for this matchup. Now, you do have to be very wary of gyrocopters. Your opponent can snipe out your lord and then wreck the rest of your army, which obviously is not fun. And it is something to be very wary of, which is why we've got the Amazon Barbs, which is why we've got the Skink Chiefs. Even if I'm not able to kill those gyrocopters quickly or kill all of them, if I can just kill enough of them and then keep 10-1 in the fight long enough, get a few spells off, get a few Manticore summons, that sort of thing, it does put me in a much stronger position overall. But yeah, Skinks got melted. That was really bad. The Red Crested Skinks did some amazing work, just really MVPs, racking up insane amounts of kills, overrunning that backline, crushing the Iron Drakes, crushing the Thunderers. 10-1, getting some great value against the Iron Drakes early on as well. Saurus and Temple Guard also just slow grind is how they work, especially the Temple Guard. They will beat just about anything in long-term battles. Now for my opponent's build, definitely a bit interesting here with the Iron Drakes and the Thanes. Kind of worked out, actually. I don't think it's a very good idea against general Lizardmen builds, though, because you'll often see monster-heavy builds. And if your opponent goes with a monster-heavy build, the only units you really have to stop that are the 2 Thunderers. Iron Drakes, I don't think will cut the mustard. So if your opponent goes with like a classic, like the Ripperdactyl, Stegodon, Skink Mob, I think this build would not work out as nicely. I actually think the Thanes Iron Drake combo worked a little better because we went so heavy on infantry and didn't have backline harass. Plus, I wasn't so good about swarming properly. So definitely some good positioning on my opponent's part and well played there, but also some misplays on my part. But Belegar definitely living up to his name there, running Belegar, Iron Hammer, and 2 Thanes. Got to give him props for that. Very cool build. Very cool concept there. And getting some massive value on some of these Iron Drakes. So really nicely done. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. As usual, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.